Well, let's get reaction to all of the big stories in the company of one of the most experienced politicians in the country and now elite-level political commentator, Sir Michael Fabricant. Good morning, Sir Michael.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. First night of the realms, so I shall fall to my knees.
Of course.
And when we conclude...
I was rather amazed you were throwing cups. People who weren't watching this, but just hearing on the radio, wasn't aware that, in fact, you were throwing cups at the camera earlier on. And I understand your outrage, and quite rightly so.
Well, we'll come to that, because there is a council in Leeds, right? Beautiful, beautiful city. I've got so many viewers and listeners in Leeds, in the West Yorkshire. And they're having therapy because Farage is visiting the city. We'll come to that, Sir Michael, but I really want to talk to you about the Prime Minister and the US President Donald Trump and a special relationship in ruins. It strikes me, Sir Michael, that old Starmer has pleased no one, because at the beginning of the war, he precluded US access to UK air bases just to refuel the jets. Now he's supporting America, which means those against the war are unhappy. This guy is sitting on the fence and winning no friends.
That's right. He's dithered all along. And now we hear that 2 rockets were fired by the Iranians at Diego Garcia. They didn't actually hit Diego Garcia. I think they ended up in the sea. But this was Iran saying, well, you're saying, Keir Starmer, that this is for defence only, but it makes no difference to us. And they will continue. And don't forget, it wasn't that long ago, even when Keir Starmer was saying that he's not going to get involved in the war whatsoever, that they fired rockets in Cyprus at the 2 British Army bases there, or RAF bases at Akrotiri and the other base further east of Akrotiri. No, he's pleased absolutely no one, least of all our strongest ally, Donald Trump, because he dithers. And let's be clear about this. Donald Trump wasn't, as some people tried to make out, asking that we take part in the war, like when the United States, I think it was President Johnson, asked Harold Wilson to take part in the Vietnam War. No, all he wanted was permission to refuel jets at British RAF bases on Diego Garcia and at Fairford in Gloucestershire. Well, we are doing that now. In fact, we did that 2 days after Trump said, Keir Starmer said, you can't do it. It's this flip-flop U-turn dither, which is absolutely typical of the way that Keir Starmer is trying to run this country. And he is running it, but into the ground.
And Iran, as you say, target Diego Garcia, which is part of the Chagos Islands, sovereign British territory, militarily, strategically significant, which the Prime Minister is trying to give away.
And he's not just giving it away. He's actually doing it by saying, I'm going to pay Mauritius, which incidentally, the Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands were never a part of Mauritius. So why Mauritius? It's
no historic claim on that territory whatsoever.
No, and more to the point, we're going to spend £39 billion of your money and mine, taxpayers' money, for the privilege of actually giving this away to... and the Chagos Islanders don't want that. Of course, the Chagos Islanders, quite understandably, would like to go back to the Chagos Islands, and I think we should let them. And in fact, a few Chagos Islanders actually landed on Diego Garcia and some of the islands not so long ago, and we should be supporting them. And you know what? They were flying the flag of the Chagos Islands, the British, what's it called? The British Indian Ocean Territory,
right,
which of course has got the Union Jack in the top left-hand corner. You know, I think it's an absolute disgrace. And this is just typical of Starmer, who can't see the wood for the trees. He argues minute points of law, which other attorneys general have said are completely irrelevant. And look where it's got us. As I said, rockets being fired at Diego Garcia and other bases, and we're involved in the war against Iran, whether we like it or not.
And indeed, just to pick up on that, there are people supportive of what's happening in Iran because it's a wicked regime, arguably the worst regime since the Third Reich, the biggest sponsor of terror in the world, potentially days or weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. So you can't really defend the Iranian regime. But whether or not you support Trump's war and Israel's war or not, it's crystal clear that the Strait of Hormuz must be liberated, because this is a stretch of water that carries 20% of the world's oil, which is why it's so important for our economy and for our viewers and listeners this morning.
And that's right. And of course, I can understand why Donald Trump is so angry about the fact that the Royal Navy, under instruction from Keir Starmer, are not going to that area. And also our allies, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and so on, who buy a lot of weapons from the British and are supposed to be protected by treaty by the British, are very, very disappointed by the fact that Britain is not getting involved at all. We're getting none of the gain, but we are getting all of the pain.
You can love or hate the war, but you must defend the Strait of Hormuz. This is a thoroughfare that has implications for the world economy.
That's right. And I would add another thing as well about Iran. I'm in Lichfield at the moment, which is not far from the National Memorial Arboretum. And Mark, you must visit it. It's an amazing place. But there are memorials there to people who have been killed since the Second World War in our armed services and other people working with the armed forces. Many of them were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq by IEDs. These are explosive devices which were either made in Iran or had people trained in Iran to work against the British. So Iran has actively worked against us. And of course, only the other day we find out that 2 Iranians were trying to break into Faz Lane, which is where the nuclear deterrent, our British nuclear deterrent, is kept. These are no friends of ours. And for those who say there is no plan at all whatsoever about what the Israelis and the Americans are up to, are really not following closely enough. You know, one of the things in Britain, and it happens elsewhere as well, is journalists follow what other journalists say and repeat it.
Yeah.
But what you need to do occasionally is actually read what is going on actually in the United States and Israel. And their war aims are very, very clear. It's not just destroying their nuclear capability. And let's be clear about this, by the way. If you are going to have a peaceful nuclear power station, you want uranium enriched to about 3 or 5%. If you want a dirty bomb, a dirty nuclear bomb, it needs to be enriched to 60%.
Yep.
And the Iranians already have that by their own admission. And if you want an atomic bomb, which is slightly different, that has to be 90%. And it's a lot easier to get from 60 to 90% than it was to get from 0% up to 60%. So there's a real danger there. And there is a very clear war aim. So not just to get rid of the nuclear threat, but also regime change. And things are beginning to happen. I mean, the Israelis have got pinpoint accuracy in the way their missiles are now striking individual police stations of the Basij. The Basij are like the territorial army of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. They're the real hardline swines who have been killing 40,000 people, some people said, were killed in January who were demonstrating. Now, if they can be disarmed slowly and systematically, and the Israelis, because it is the Israelis who have human intelligence based in Iran, can actually provide weapons to the ordinary people, and the army, the Artesh is the army, and the regular Iranian army are no fans of the Ayatollah. They just do as they're told. They're enlisted men. They're not the extremists. If they could rise up against the Ayatollahs, you'll end up with a decent regime in Iran, and a regime which is not so evil as this Muslims extremists.
Well, I want your help with this, because many on the right have deserted Donald Trump and think that this war in Iran has been a major strategic mistake. But I'm just looking at incentives here, Sir Michael, and it strikes me that Donald Trump has nothing to gain from this war in Iran. It's very inflationary, so it's going to increase the cost of living for Americans. The MAGA base aren't happy. They were promised no foreign wars. It's going to cost cash because Congress have already been asked for another, the Pentagon looking for $200 billion just to keep the war effort going. So with no skin in the game, with no political advantage achieved, it strikes me that Donald Trump is doing this because it's the right thing to do. This is a noble war.
Yeah, and he's also right, Donald Trump, when he says, look, when the war is over, things will return to normal.
They'll be better.
Fairly. Pardon?
They'll be better, won't they?
They will be a lot better.
Because you won't have this wicked regime that's got its whip hand over the Middle East.
That's right. And let's not also forget that the reason why there was the October 7th attack by Hamas on a completely peaceful pop festival that was going on in the Negev desert in Israel, and various villages and towns that were attacked, was because Israel was about to sign a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. And the Iranians didn't want that, so they provoked the war in Gaza. And of course, Hamas is completely operated. It's a tool of the Iranian regime, as is Hezbollah in the Lebanon, and as are the Houthis, by the way, who've been firing rockets from time to time, not only at Israel, but also at the Americans, and also shipping in the Gulf of Hormuz, or the Straits of Hormuz. So, you know, it is a wicked regime, and money will be saved in any event if you had a normal regime. I'm not saying Saudi Arabia is that marvelous, you know, although they're getting more modernized. But,
it's a Western ally, isn't it?
It's a Western ally, and in a way, from a moral point of view, it doesn't kill its own people. Yes, we've heard that on occasion there is the odd execution, which nobody condones at all.
And women can't drive, which I think is not too bad.
Well, they've changed that. I believe that's now being changed. They are allowing it. The new Crown Prince has allowed that, which is a good thing.
Yeah, he's gone woke.
But certainly they don't
You should see Mrs. Dolan's parking.
Yeah, they don't mass execute 40,000 people as what happened in January.
No, you're absolutely right. So, Michael, therefore, I mean, I'm just going to characterize this in a very simple way, but it strikes me that Donald Trump has a moral purpose here, because with no political advantage, no economic advantage, I think he just thinks that he's John Wayne and that this is a cowboy movie. It's a spaghetti Western. And Iran are the evil Mexicans that have to be dealt with. I mean, I hate to put it in such binary terms, but I think this is a moral judgment that Donald Trump has made.
I think that's right. And I would go further. You know, it's quite sort of accepted in Britain that Trump is a fool. Far from it. Far from it. Now, he does say amazing things in press conferences. I mean, it was an incredible thing that happened the other day when the Japanese Prime Minister was with him. I don't know whether you've covered that. There was the Japanese visit to America. And
he teased the Prime Minister about Pearl Harbor. He said, oh, you guys know all about surprises, right?
That's right. He said, you know all about surprises. That's how you got us in Pearl Harbor. And I thought, well, talk about politically incorrect. But the key thing is that he has a very clear global vision. You know, one of the reasons for taking out Maduro in Venezuela was to stop oil getting to Cuba. And he's now got an oil blockade on Cuba. Cuba and America are currently in secret or fairly secret negotiations. We could see regime change in Cuba, with Cuba being restored to being a normal country in the Caribbean, which I can tell you, having been to Cuba, would certainly benefit the poor people of Cuba who live in abject poverty because of the Castro regime. No, he's got a much broader vision than people give him credit for. And, you know, Trump is someone in some ways we should admire. Of course, he says odd things at times in press conferences. He loves his press conferences because Biden was absolutely terrified. Biden, of course, was Trump's predecessor. He was terrified of ever appearing before the press because he couldn't answer questions. The poor man was already in the early stages, some would say advanced stages, of dementia. But Trump loves these press conferences, and he does say things from time to time which are absolutely wild. But this shouldn't disguise the fact that he has an overall plan. And that overall plan, I believe, is for the benefit of the West and for the United Kingdom at this time to be antagonizing Trump unnecessarily, because we only reversed the decision 2 days later not to allow the Americans to use our bases, was stupidity in the extreme. But then that's Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer and stupidity, well, you know what? Those things go together.
You say tomato, I say tomato. Sir Michael, I'm delighted to say that you're staying with us. One of the most experienced politicians in the country and now elite-level political commentator, Sir Michael Fabricant, who's going to stay with us. And I've got a couple of very big stories for you. Eid brings 30,000 Muslims to a Birmingham park in a mass outdoor prayer to mark the end of Ramadan. Is public Muslim prayer un-British? Plus, Labour's Boris wave immigration U-turn. This is a shocker. It could cost you and I £250 billion. You heard me right. That's next. Labour's immigration betrayal. Well, let's raise this subject with Sir Michael Fabricant, former Conservative MP and now political broadcaster. Sir Michael, lovely to have you on the show. One of the very positive policies of this current Labour administration came from the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who doubled the length of time that you have to wait to receive indefinite leave to remain from 5 years to 10 years, with some excellent terms and conditions, including excellent command of the English language. You need an income and you need to not have a criminal record. So this was a great move from this Labour government. I'll always give credit where it's due. Unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to happen because of pressure from left-wing MPs and one Angela Rayner.
That's right. I mean, Shabana Mahmood has been a breath of fresh air, actually, in her approach. But I actually wondered from the very beginning whether she would ever see it come through. We've had so many rebellions on the Labour side, on welfare and so many other issues. Yeah. I wondered whether there would be a rebellion.
Too good to be true, Michael. Too good to be true.
Too good to be true. And, of course, Angela Rayner is very much after the Prime Ministership of the United Kingdom. Can you imagine? And I've made a prediction on your show, and I'll repeat it after the May elections, because they've just been waiting not to have any particular disturbance, waiting until the May elections are over. At the beginning of May, the local elections, there will be a challenge, I think, on Keir Starmer. I think Keir Starmer always was a dud. That was the word I used many, many months ago when he was quite popular, well, fairly popular after the general election. But you know what? Angela Rayner is going to rebel against this. So are the vast majority of Labour backbenchers. It'll be very interesting, by the way, to see what the Conservative Party does, because will they support the Labour Party and say, you know what, Shabana Mahmood, what she's doing is right, and will they support her? Or will, in fact, Keir Starmer just cave in and the whole policy just collapse without going to a vote? That'll be an interesting thing to see.
Well, it breaks my heart. I think it's devastating because I believe this is actually a financial Ponzi scheme for the country and for my viewers and listeners, Sir Michael, because let me just quote you this figure, because it's very important that I get this across, just how costly this Boris wave U-turn could be. You're looking at something in the region of £250 billion that will be payable over the lifetime of these people granted indefinite leave to remain. Michael, nothing wrong with these folk. They're trying to have a better life here, but they're going to be low-skilled workers, therefore dependent on in-work benefits for the rest of their lives, not to mention cheaper housing, NHS, school places. And many of those people will also be unemployed and fully dependent on the state. So this is a massive, gigantic mortgage on the future of the country.
That's absolutely right. But there's another more serious issue. Many of them are coming from developing countries. That's why they want to come here in the first place. And as you say, there's always been economic migration. But the question with these people are, will they integrate? Many of them are going to be Muslim. And, I've got many Muslim friends who are very decent people. But the ones who are religious really believe very, very much in the literal meaning of the Quran, which talks about no tolerance for other religions, and really brings us back to what you were talking about earlier, which is this massive demonstration in a city not far from Lichfield, Birmingham, by Muslims with how many people was it in public?
30,000. 30,000.
30,000 people. You don't get Jewish people doing that. You don't get Hindus doing that. You certainly don't get Roman Catholics or Anglicans doing that.
More's the pity.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I actually think religion should be a private thing.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be a public thing. If you want to go to a mosque, fine. If you want to go to a synagogue, a shul, that's fine. If you want to go to church. I went to Evensong last night. You know what? I don't really believe in the literal thing about Jesus being Son of God, but I love the music. And Evensong is a free concert and a rather spiritual thing at Lichfield Cathedral, and that was lovely. But you know what? We don't do it in a public place. And that's how it should be. And I think 30,000 people gathering in Birmingham, is really making a statement, rather like flying a Palestinian flag, which is, we believe in the caliphate. We believe in changing a country to our way of thinking, instead of being tolerant and instead of adapting to the mores of the country you've moved to. That's the worry about all these people coming here and staying here.
Nick Timothy is the Conservative MP and Shadow Justice Secretary who's sparked this debate with a post on X, Sir Michael, criticising this public display of Muslim faith at Trafalgar Square. I think in the region of 3,000 people, mostly men, by the way, with the women at the back. Not a squeak from the progressive left or the feminists about that, because they've got selective moral blindness. But do you know Nick Timothy? He was, of course, one of the key advisors to Theresa May during her administration. Do you know Nick Timothy, and what's your view of his intervention?
Well, I think he's saying what was previously unsayable because of the woke era in which we live. And I do know Nick Timothy. Nick Timothy was an advisor before he was an advisor to Theresa May, to a good friend of mine, Andy Street. Now, Andy Street was the mayor of the West Midlands. Now, he and I don't always agree, actually, on some of these issues. You should get Andy Street on.
Well, we love Andy, but he's terribly left-wing. That's the problem.
Well, I wouldn't say he's left-wing, but he is terribly woke. I don't know why I'm
he's been
defending
struck
him,
with the woke mind
woke
virus, to which there's no cure. But he's a lovely man.
I'll tell you a story.
Let me tell you, he was a great boss of John Lewis, and also he was a great Midlands mayor.
He was brilliant.
Give me your story. Give me your story.
But I will tell you a story. I remember once taking part in one of the many votes we have in the House of Commons. And during the vote, we all collect in the same big room, the I lobby or the no lobby. And the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, came running up to me, rubbing his hands, as Rishi is a very enthusiastic person. And I think he just had a row with Andy Street. And he says to me, "You've got to tell me your secret, Michael." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why are you and Andy such great friends?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, you don't agree on anything. You don't agree on HS2 because Andy was pro HS2. I wasn't. You don't agree on Brexit because I was always a leaver and he was a remain." And he went through so many other lists. I mean, the reason why we're great friends is because we like the same sort of hobbies, traveling and walking and this sort of thing. But but Nick Timothy, back to him, worked with Andy Street. And I think Nick Timothy has seen the light. I think he has seen what was going on in Birmingham. And Nick Timothy is absolutely right to call this sort of thing out. And I wouldn't say, it's wrong to have mass Muslim prayer. So I just don't think it's right to have any religious prayer where you're imposing it on other people.
I think that's what's wrong. That's a great landing place. Michael, we could happily have you for the 4 hours because you have the energy, the intellect, the experience and the wisdom. It was so brilliant to see you. We really look forward to your return. Have an excellent Saturday, Sir Michael, and all the very best to you. Thank you for a great contribution